Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Love of Creatives. I am your Connections and Community Guy host, Dwight, and I'm joined by the other Connections and Community Guy host, Maddox. And today we are joined by our featured guest, David Powell. Hello, David.
Hey everyone, great to be here.
We're so excited that you could join us on the podcast. And I know that there are some people who might be quite familiar with all your work and what you do, but for a lot of people, this may be the first time that they're hearing about you. So could you share just a little bit about who you are and what you're about?
Yeah, so I am a creative digital project manager for a hospitality company in my full-time role. If you ever thought that you couldn't have a really cool job that was completely around bars and brew pubs, you were wrong. I'm living proof of that. Um, and on the side, I do a lot of freelance web design, product design, and a little bit of digital marketing. So I've gotten to have my hand in a lot of really unique spaces, everything from like classical violins to the diviest bars that you can name in Los Angeles. Um, yeah, so that's what I do for working creatively right now.
How exciting. Uh, Tell me, it sounds like you have the potential to experience quite a bit of adventure with your work. Do you have any fun stories about things that you've gotten into because of the work you do?
I think that part of the fun of working in the digital space for place like a physical location, like a bar or a brew pub, is that the research is on the ground, right? One of the fun things that we did last year, one of the bars that I work with in downtown LA wanted to feature a guide on their website and also in like full printouts of downtown LA and their favorite spots in it. So to do the research for that, I actually got to go with some of the other members of this project team, and we just went and had burgers and pizzas and beers across downtown LA, and would be sitting and having a slice of pizza somewhere, and then remember, oh yeah, there's this great coffee spot around the corner. It might be the best coffee in downtown LA. So, we got to go and like experience all those places, talk to the owners, and then, I get to come back to my home office and do like a weird 3D designed gopher head because the bar is called the Golden Gopher. So, just that intersection of adventures in person with people is really what translates to better design and more fun design in the digital space.
Oh, it's great that you should say that because I'm reminded of some interesting research that I just learned about where a lot of design experts were given the task of trying to come up with building a specific project, and what they found was those that actually manipulated the items, like actually handled them and worked with mechanical parts, came up with more compelling and more creative designs. They were, independently judged to be the better designs than those that just approached it with, using what they knew about color, form, theory, angles, and
Yeah.
there's something about just actually being in it and engaging all of your senses so that you can really inject a part of yourself, a part of your person, your essence. And I think we all appreciate that organic, living aspect of what we see. So tell me
Yeah.
how it is that you found yourself in this really cool space where you get to do these cool things, because it's not one of those tracks that people look at in school and say, "Oh, well, I want to go and do promotional work for all for bars and hospitality." And
Yeah, and I think that I'm in a pretty unique position. I work with a company that is over 20 locations strong in three different states, and we are exclusively a bar company. We don't have restaurants, we don't have coffee shops, it's just bars. And trying to find people in that same vertical to even ask questions is nearly impossible. Not hard if you're looking for restaurants or hotel groups, but I'm not familiar with other places that are just bars, unless you count like Chili's. And we're all unique concepts. Um, I found myself in this position because I was a freelance web designer. I went to Austin and I completed a UI design boot camp to kind of augment my self-taught skills. And while I was in Austin for that, I fell in love with the city. I moved there, and while I was trying to freelance my way into a more sustainable career as a web designer, I started going to happy hours and saw people making cocktails, and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And you get to do it and talk to people. And at that point, I just didn't want to be behind my computer, not hanging out with people. I was in my early 20s. So I had a moment where I was sitting at a bar and thinking, man, it'd be so cool if I could just like do this. And at the same time, the other thought that in my head was like, well, you're like 22, 23, you can. So I, I for a few years thought I'm just going to be a cocktail bartender and open my own bars. And it was so creatively fulfilling. And I'm sure I can talk a little bit about that because if you want a creative community, like craft cocktail bartenders had that on lock, at least at the time I was doing it a few years ago. But eventually, that nightlife is no longer as attractive as it was in your 20s or when you were single. I'm married now, and I started to want to not be in that for the long term, but I still really love hospitality. So the company that I was working for as a bartender, this over 20 bar group strong company, needed somebody to just come in and do like systems admin work.
Hmm.
And I took the experience I had as a web designer and I said like, hey, I can come in and do this. I get technology. I get what you do. I understand the culture of the company. And I have been in that role for, gosh, 2.5 years now. And it's grown from, hey, we need somebody to create emails for us to, hey, can you help us develop like internal tools using like this mixture of AI, people and just sheer force and sweat, which has been a really cool job. It's hard to define. That's why we just say digital project manager, but it's a lot of different things, and I have to be really creative in the role.
Oh, and that is awesome. And as you described how you're kind of in a unique space, you're on your own. That forces you to be creative in the classical sense because you don't necessarily have a recipe that you can follow.
No, and thank God for the few people who will pick up the phone when I do call. They're not in exactly the same space, but it's wonderful when I can have that peer review. But yeah, it's a lot of just testing things and seeing what works.
That
I
is,
think it's cool that you, as a creative, are not just doing your creative work, but the people that you serve. So much of the people that you come in contact with are creatives. That's got to make the whole process just more interesting and more enjoyable, I would think. I know it would be for me to be serving, well, I mean, we do everything we do has to do with creatives, and it's such a different animal than just dealing with everyday people that don't maybe consider themselves creative or um yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
really cool.
it's definitely a great community to be part of, and you're right. I mean, the people who find themselves in any kind of service industry are often super creative people. They're people who maybe it's not what they want to do full time, or if it is, they just turn all their creativity into that role. But I work with people who have gone from bartenders to general managers for the company to now people who work in HR. And they have graphic design degrees, and on the side they have like hair care products, e-commerce stores. Um, our VP of Ops uses AI to try to build apps all the time for fun. They're just people who like to put something out into the world.
and what a great place to
I'd like to
be.
dip back. Oh,
No, you're good. There's just a
great.
little bit of a delay. Go ahead, Maddox.
Oh, I was just going to say, I would like to go back maybe to an earlier time. How did you come to realize that you were creative, and how old were you, and what did that look like when it first manifested and you saw that you liked to make things? Tell us that origin story, please.
Yeah, so for I mean, from as long as I can remember, I really loved to draw. I was really attracted to comic books, and I loved cartoons when I was a kid. So I started out just drawing dragons and Batman or whatever. And as I got older, I took some art lessons. I started getting really obsessed with like sketching out plans for this camp that I thought I would make, or forts in the backyard. And as I got older and could use tools, sometimes I would build the forts, or I remember making stilts in my parents' basement. Like I just wanted to make stuff, and it was really fulfilling for me. And I think that I knew I was creative then. And as I got older, I kind of turned my mind towards, oh, well, like, how can I make that make money? Or I don't actually need to be that creative. I just need to like do something that makes money. And it's only been more recently that I've admitted, like, I'm never going to be fulfilled if I don't lean into this creativity. It's the reason that when I work on a project and I don't think it's good, like I'm upset for days. Like even if it doesn't matter, even if it gets the job done, if it's not something that I want to show to somebody else, it bothers me. And you gotta do what you do in work. And sometimes there are deadlines and sometimes there are budgets and constraints, and sometimes you just get called away to other things. But I like making stuff that's good. Uh, I saw that when I was working in the cocktail scene. I saw that when I was in college and I was a barista. Like I loved learning how to do latte art. Like anything that I could create that was beautiful to me, but also made somebody else happy, like gave me that point of connection with somebody else, was the best thing ever. Unfortunately, couldn't remain a barista forever, but
I get it completely. I've started painting. I've painted on and off, but I'm painting again, and I don't care whether my paintings ever hang in a gallery. I don't care if I ever sell a painting, but the one thing that I really want is I want to create good art. So I
yeah,
get exactly what you're saying. Like I want to, if nobody ever sees it but me or maybe a few people that come into my home, I just want to create something that makes me feel good about it.
yeah.
So I
I
get
mean,
it.
it sounds narcissistic, but I go back and read my own poems. I don't share them with people usually, but like, it's not even that I'm like, oh, that's so good. It's more, I go back and read and I'm reminded of, like, hey, I did that. Like, I felt some way and I put it on paper. Whether it's good or not, like, it's there. I gave birth to that. And that's just so fulfilling for me.
May I challenge you to uh, excavate some of that stuff because I'm learning more and more that art doesn't become art until it's shared.
That's so interesting because that's the scary part, right? You asked about
Yes.
like going backwards to when I knew I was creative. I knew I was creative for a long time, but I got more and more scared to show it. I actually remember when I was living in Austin, I was writing a lot of poetry at the time, and I finally got the guts to go to an open mic night they had at this place called Spider House Ballroom. And I got up on the stage and like I read my poem, and I got back off the stage, and they score it there because it's technically a competition, and I don't even know what I scored. I stepped off the stage after that. I like shook hands with some of the other people who had been in line, and somebody else gets up to read their poem, and I was like, I think I need to go outside and just like smoke a cigarette because back then I thought that was cool too. And I go outside and I light a cigarette and I walk into the alley beside the ballroom, and I just vomited everywhere in the alley. And I stood back up and I was like, oh, so like I'm really scared to share this creative part of myself. I was like, this is like probably a wake up call for me. And I tried to walk back into the ballroom and then I threw up again. I was like, okay, this night's over for me. But that was an experience where I realized, oh, the hard part for me is never going to be the creating. It's going to be having the guts to put it in front of people.
This is a
You know,
powerful callback to episode 33, Patrick Williams, where he talked about creative collapse. You're describing an experience that was your own creative collapse when it came to sharing your art.
Yeah. I mean, I remembering that moment, I still feel just like the same way. Your stomach just like your heart dropping into your stomach, or your just that emptying out. Um, I guess it's fitting that I said it's like birthing something to to write poetry, but uh, yeah, that just burned into my mind. I ended up writing a story about it later, so it wasn't like at all a wasted experience. I learned from it, but it gave me this new respect for all the friends that I'd ever seen get up on stage in bands in high school or college, or friends. I had a lot of friends who were in theater, and I never respected enough the guts that it took for them to be up there. I had not felt that much fear, and I didn't realize it was fear until after I got up the stage. Like in the moment, the adrenaline went, and I did the thing, but afterwards, I was like, that was the most terrifying thing that I've ever done.
I suspect that if you stepped into your courage and put some of your creativity out there, whether it's poetry or whatever it is, drawings, doesn't matter. I think that I really believe that you would find that you would be the worst critic. Does that
That's
make sense?
yeah. Um, And that's another thing too. Anytime that I have shared with people and given them a chance to give feedback, they've never been rude or hateful. Um, sometimes the feedback is constructive, but it's never been that thing you're so afraid of, like, oh, you're actually a bad person because you wrote this poem, or you're less than because this picture that you drew is not up to my standards. That's just not.
Well,
I,
we do get rude comments from time to time. Every once in a while, we'll get a rude comment on something we put out there, either a video that we have created, or, somebody will say something that's just downright mean. And I've just kind of learned, I mean, hurt people. When that comes across, or when I see it even happening to somebody else, somebody's bashing somebody's something online, I just think, oh, that poor soul, they must be hurting, because it really isn't about the thing that they're being so rude and mean about. I've actually trained myself to, when I get like something negative like that, I just laugh. I make it a point to burst into laughter and then just move on. I don't delete it. I don't respond. I just laugh hysterically and move on. It's kind of a, I don't know, coping mechanism maybe, but it's a conscious
yeah,
decision that I make.
yeah. I mean, the idea of, I mean, maybe you guys have done it. I'm not actually sure if I ever have, but the idea of attacking a stranger on the internet for something that they put out, or attacking someone in person, even worse. Like, I don't even think I've ever booed anyone at a show, at a sports game. Maybe it's part of the culture, but it's to get yourself to that point would mean that you're pretty unhappy. Um, and I found that
Oh,
when I'm more critical of people's creativity, it's not because it's so bad. It's because I'm envious that, you know, oh, I think I could probably do better, but they actually had the guts to put it out there to do it, you know? It's an envy
I
thing for me.
I think that is a profound awareness, David, and probably something that our listeners, at least a percentage of them, need to hear. You know, I find myself sometimes looking at art and going, "Ooh, that doesn't work for me at all." I don't say that's not art. I don't do that. I don't
Hmm.
say that's bad. I just say, "Wow, that does not speak to me." But in the same breath, oftentimes I would say, and I don't think for a minute that I could do better.
Yeah,
It's not about, that. It's just, I mean, things call to us or they don't.
Right.
And I
It's
think
art's
that
right.
subjective.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's okay to say something doesn't call to you, but when you bash it, I somehow I've gotten somebody in my Facebook feed. He's an artist and a seasoned artist, and all of his videos are about like tearing people down and saying, that's bullshit. That's just shit. That's not art. And I've tried to I'm not following him, so I can't unfollow him. I've tried everything I can to get him out of my feed, and nothing has worked. I don't know why he's in my feed, but yeah, every video is where he is just ripping somebody to shreds about their art, and I'm like thinking, what's going on with him?
It's like kind of how Gordon Ramsay made his name in the kitchen,
Right.
you know? Um, and it's so funny because so many people could get better if they were allowed to be bad first, or if they allowed themselves to be bad first, you know?
Well,
Um,
being bad first is an integral part of you. We don't get to good without
yeah.
being bad first. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm creating some ugly shit.
and
And it's just part of the deal.
right, and I mean it's the same sort of thing as uh I'll see people tear down, like I get stand-up comedy in my social media feeds. And sometimes I'll get interviews with comedians and they'll tear down another comedian because, oh yeah, they copied this joke, or oh, they just like are doing what they see on TikTok that's trending. So, they're not really being original, they're not really doing comedy. And like, to some of their credit in the interviews, I saw one comedian say, "You're gonna copy everybody else for probably the first 2 years that you do it before you find out what you have to say."
Yeah.
You know,
It's part
When-
of learning the craft.
yeah. When I
Well, and
was
not only
writing,
that, go ahead.
I was just gonna say when I was writing, blog posts or poetry, I was I was just kind of parroting whoever I happened to be reading at the time. My short stories from when I was in my early 20s, like they're just me trying to be Hunter S. Thompson. Like my poetry from the same period, I'm just me trying to be Bukowski. And like, you grow up and you realize that you have your own things to say. And, maybe you don't idolize the same people that you did when you were younger and dumber, but it's part of the process of finding who you are and what you want to say.
Well, and truthfully, there's not a lot out there that's original anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I will say I'm very intuitive, and I get these like intuitive hits about ideas about our business or about all kinds of things. And I will come up with something that just literally comes into the top of my head in the form of an idea. I'm very connected to that unseen realm. And I will go, "Oh my God, I just had the most amazing idea." And then either Dwight will say, "Well, that already exists." Or I'll go out and I'll Google and I'll find I've never seen it before. I've never heard it before. This was for me an original idea. And there it is, already completely, out there and advanced. It's just
Yeah.
it's there's not a lot that's original anymore.
No, and I'm not sure if it's been referenced on this. No, I'm pretty sure it's been referenced on this podcast before, but in The Creative Act by Rick Rubin,
Yeah.
he mentions that if you have an idea and you don't act on it, don't be surprised to see someone else act on it at the same time. He basically is kind of talking about what you were talking about, Maddox. Like, there's the source of this creativity, and this idea is trying to choose a vessel, more or less. And if you refuse to be that
Yes.
vessel, it's going to find one. So,
Yes.
and who's to say it can't find a few, right? I
Exactly.
interned at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center back when startups were crazy big in Nashville. And one of the things that they would say when someone brought in an idea to them was, "Who's already doing this?" And if the person responded, "No one's doing this," they would say, "Well, if it could make money, somebody probably would. So you're going to have to really prove to us that this completely original idea is worth investing in." Um, it's not a bad thing to be unoriginal. Like you can you can get original along the way.
We had an experience here just recently where we were at a weekend conference, an art show. It's called Art Boost, and we were asked to facilitate a time on Saturday morning that was kind of like a networking thing, because that's what we do. We connect people and bring people together, and we call it people magic. And we've coined that phrase. We're all about creating people magic. So we went in and we had about 25 minutes was all. And we created people magic. It was the loudest, most noisy part of the entire 2 day conference. It was the most energetic, and a lot of people told us that afterwards. And 2 weeks later, there was somebody that actually told us that they were hosting something. They had loved what they saw, and they had taken our idea and massaged it a little bit to fit their use. And we were actually going to something where they were doing this, and it was just like, it might have well been us. It was like, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And I had this mixed bag of feelings. There was this part of me that was going, wow, that's really flattering. It's like she thought what we were doing was so fabulous that she ripped off and duplicated R&D, as they say. And then there was
Yeah.
this part of me that kind of felt like, wow, that's kind of nervy, kind of ballsy to do it right in front of our faces. And I don't have any. She's a lovely person. I'm not bashing her in any way. She did a decent job of demonstrating that. But it was kind of this double-edged sword. I was kind of like, you know, but when you think about it, most of the things that we do, we've picked up little hints of it here and hints of it
Yeah.
there. And we learned something in this training, and then we saw something where we were being trained, or I don't know, um, everything's borrowed.
Yeah, and I know I'm gonna be careful how I say this because I don't want you guys to get hate, and I don't want hate personally. Um, and I'm in it's very murky ethically with generative AI right now, because it's pulling from copyrighted individual contributor kind of material in a little more of a direct way. The thing that I am like thinking about with that though is how do we develop our own personal styles in whatever we do without going and kind of training ourselves on what other people have already done. A little bit different in the sense of generative AI, but it made me, when I saw a lot of people talking about how it's copyright infringement or it's, um, a danger to creators, uh, I understand that and I agree with that. But it made me think, well, how can I say that anything I do is original if I also kind of feel like I'm going and training myself on just like looking at things other people have already created. And I think probably it comes down to the intention and the effort and the fact that I personally have to put my own life experiences into it, my own pain, and it's not just an algorithm on an algorithm. But it makes you question like how original can I be and what makes it different and unique to me, and I think that just comes down to what are my life experiences that I'm adding to this? Maddox, when you were talking about how that woman was kind of doing the same thing with a little bit of a massaging on it, I thought about that Oscar Wilde quote. That is often just the first half of the quote. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Well, the other half of that quote is that mediocrity can pay to greatness. Um, and not to say that what she was doing was mediocre, but when you just go and completely imitate someone else, it's gonna be mediocre compared to the lightning in a bottle that they had when they originally had the idea, until you really massage it and add your own personality and creativity to it.
You are spot on. When I think about how we have developed what we have developed, it has come at one little snippet at a time from so many places. And what we've pulled together is, yes, something that we learned over here and something that we saw over here. but we've put our own spin on it and we've taken this collection of things. I mean, I've not seen anything, and we go to a lot of shit. We go to a lot of shit that has to do with artists and creatives, and we don't ever see anything remotely like what we do. We don't
Yeah.
ever. But
And at
we saw little snippets of all that from a gazillion things that we've done. We're always tweaking and altering just a little bit. So it's like we took, we found 100 $1 bills as we scoured around the city, and we put them all together, and now we have $100, and we could trade it
Right.
in and get $100 bill. But it all started off as $1 bills that came from very different places. I don't think, Dwight, have we ever like literally imitated something that we saw somewhere else? I
No,
don't.
because we can appreciate that there's, and in most cases, it would not be appropriate. Like it would be tone deaf to what it is that we were trying to bring it to if we just tried to
Yeah.
replicate something that we saw.
I mean, we've
And
been we've been at Creative Mornings for a year now, or a little over, and we love Creative Mornings. And we've been very, very specific in saying, not just ourselves, but to others, we serve the same community that they do, but we don't serve it in the way they do, and we don't intend to serve it in the way they do. They have that covered. We're going to
right.
serve the community a completely different way.
It's funny too. I mean, talk about creative mornings, which is where I met the two of you. But I started going to creative mornings when I was um, sitting in the car waiting for my wife to get out of her night school classes at SMU for a graduate program that she's doing. And I was just listening to David Bowie and like, the his catalog of music is super varied and different, but I was like, wow, this is like there's some real artistry here that I've been missing in my life. Just like this is like music for its own sake. A lot of it's not really commercially very viable. Um, anyway, it kind of put that creative bug in me again, where I was like, I need to get around people who are doing creative things again. The reason I bring it up is because during the time that I first started going to creative mornings, I was like, oh, I'll listen to this podcast about David Bowie's life. Maybe it'll like inspire me in some way that I haven't been inspired in a little bit, trying to be more creative. His entire first like decade of making music was a huge failure because he was just trying to rip off whatever was trendy. And he didn't actually see very much success until he got past that period of just imitating everybody else, you know? Then he got some commercial success, and my favorite records by him are when he was making experimental music that he didn't really seem to care that much about the reception. It was just because it was fun. But yeah, like
I, I, I do think that the imitation is a viable aspect of it. I find for myself as a baby artist, somebody that's
mhm,
still very much in the beginning stages of learning techniques, the only way I can learn that technique is watching somebody else do that technique and then trying to do that technique.
right.
To me, it's not about replicating a painting that somebody else has done or a sculpture. It's more about practicing the technique that they were demonstrating. And so there is a lot of imitation right now, and I think that has its place, in anything. I think that you can see a public speaker and say, "Wow, they did such an amazing job of really like capturing the audience, that charisma," and you want to emulate that. And
But
sometimes you
it's,
do. You have to like copy it briefly
Yeah,
until you don't,
well, yeah,
until
you got to
you
right,
find
can,
your own spin on it.
right.
yes.
It's going to fall flat if all you're doing is a direct imitation. But if you can lean into what's genuine, what is authentic to you, what's your thumbprint, that is what's going to be land charismatically and elevate your esteem, the way that you're viewed in a space because people see something that has a soul and they are just drawn to it because it's real.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you were trying to become a chef and express yourself through cooking, you're not going to reinvent like the method by which you saute something or bake something or, you know, julienne carrots or whatever. You've got to learn all that first, and then you kind of have the medium and the tools, and maybe then you decide that you're going to create a new shape of pasta after you've already learned, why people have the existing shapes of pasta. It's like
Yeah,
y-
you have to
it's
master a technique first.
Right.
right.
And there's, and
Maddox, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, Maddox, in a conversation that we had once, I remember I was talking about podcasting and you recommended a course and you said, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel when it comes to just like getting a podcast going. If somebody has a wheel, I will buy it from them so that I can go where I want to go. It's not about like reinventing the vehicle.
Yeah. And God, the guy that taught that course, I'm in podcast number 2 now, and my podcasts are not even remotely anything like his. But the structure that he taught me and how to put it together, that was, there are aspects that, y- and even still, I made it mine. I started off with the original structure that he taught, and as I went into it, I began to see, oh, I think this would work better for me, and I would adjust it as I saw fit. Um, but he was selling his, and I bought
Right.
it, so I had a right to use exactly what. Yeah, I say that a lot. You're very right. A lot of people have heard me say I'm at a time in my life where I don't have the time or the energy to reinvent the wheel. You know, I'm getting ready to turn 69 years old, and so I want the fast track. And if I can buy the wheel rather than reinvent the wheel, and I can afford to buy that wheel, I will do that. I will
right.
absolutely do that.
And we see that with all of the modern conveniences of life. You know that I love to bake bread, but we're gonna buy it in loaves because I'm not going to spend all day with all of the effort. And then how far do you want to take that? Do I want to mill my own wheat? I mean,
Right.
When I first started painting, I just went out and bought paints and canvases and brushes and just started putting paint on the canvas. And I wasn't terribly successful. I produced a couple of pieces that I was pleased with, but I wasn't terribly successful. And this time around, I've kind of gotten really back into it. And this time I've realized you really did some things that were just didn't work. I started off with really huge canvases. I went out and bought really big canvases, but yet I had zero technique. And and I just started putting paint on the canvas. This time I've started off with smaller canvases and paper. This time I'm actually taking classes. Most of them are online, so they're video education. But once again, I'm paying for somebody to teach me techniques that once I have that technique down, then I can use that technique any way I want and make it mine. And
Right.
it's a game changer. Um, I would imagine that there's probably a lot of artists that don't ever have any kind of training whatsoever. They really do just get in and start playing with the stuff and keep going until they do find their way and make something their own. But once again, I tried that and that didn't work for me. I thought I got to have some technique here, whatever that is. Um, it's just an interesting thing. There's so many different ways to skin a cat. And
Yeah.
we had this conversation just recently on another podcast. We as human beings are trained to think there's only one right answer. School teaches us that there's one right answer, and you're either right or you're wrong. And life is not like that. There's often many solutions to any problem, and it's not always an either or. Many times it can be an and, but we don't see it that way because that's not the way we were raised and oh, entrenched, whatever the word you would. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I think,
I was just going to say, I love, David, the way that you were able to embrace the different seasons in your life. So you had interest that drove you to try to create using the poetry and the blog. And when you were really entrenched in the bar scene, when you worked as a barista, and you were able to gracefully move from one chapter to the next. Uh,
graceful would be a stretch if anybody who knows me for a long period of time listens to this podcast. I'm self-aware, everybody. Graceful might be going a little far, but
well, but
You know,
you
the thing
leaned
that
into
sticks out.
the spirit of improv. You took
yeah.
what you were given and you were able to move forward. Whereas for some people, if the change had been too severe too soon, they would collapse. They would have a real problem picking themselves up and moving forward.
The
I mean,
thing
as
that sticks. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that that goes back to what you guys are all about. It wasn't just the creativity that drove me. It I had some good people around me. The community
Mhm.
helps with that tremendously.
Yeah, we're very big believers of that, of course. I think that there are a lot of artists that out there that could be much more accomplished and prolific if they would lean into community and all that it can bring into the creative process. One of the things that I love about your story today is just very obviously how much fun you've had along the way. Sometimes creative process and making things can be filled with struggle and strife. And you have managed to, not that you probably haven't had some struggles, but you have just had a lot of fun along the way. What a beautiful way to go.
Yeah. And thank you for reminding me of that. It's funny. Uh I was literally journaling about that this past week. I um I wrote down, as funny as it sounds, um I wrote down, God must like me. Like because even when things were hard, like they worked out. I had a good time. I didn't At the end of the day, nothing has put me down where I couldn't get back up. And I've had a lot of fun and got to experience a lot of life. Um, that as a callback to the the whole Bukowski inspiring my poetry when I was younger, more vulnerable, and uh, a little more rambunctious. I have a tattoo on my arm that says "lucky," and that's because there's a poem of his where he says, "I'm lucky. I've always been lucky. Even when I was starving to death, the bands were playing for me." And I, I mean, even when I was on a mattress on a floor of a house in Austin that I was renting for a couple $100 a month, like I was having a great time, you know?
You know what makes your story really unique is you really have crafted and curated your life. You've done what you've wanted to do. And when you had those little nudges, you didn't say, oh no, I could never do that. That wouldn't be a good thing to do. You went off and did it. I mean, do you know how few people can say that?
Um, yeah, thank you for that. That's really validating, and it's hard for me to look at my life that way sometimes, but 31 years in, if I look back now, I I do feel that, and I'm pretty happy with where I've gotten after it's all said and done, and I'm excited for what's next, which is a great
Well,
place to be. Excited for
the
what's coming.
story about the mixology, and just thinking, God, that looks like fun. I just want to do it. And you just you just shifted life and it was a completely different direction than what you had been doing and there you were having a blast. I
Yeah,
love
and
that.
you know, it's stuff that stays with you. I made coffee in college to make some extra money, and now if people come and visit me, I have an espresso machine at home. I still like, it's not like I lost that form of creative expression. It's not like I can't still connect with people in that way. You just, they're all tools in your creative utility belt as you move forward.
Well, we're kind of running short on time, but I want to, with a couple of more things. First, I'd love to know what's next. What's next on the horizon? What's the next big thing that you are kind of leaning into, or something that any messages like, wow, I want to go be, a barista, something of that nature where you could just pivot.
Yeah, so I've been thinking through this a lot lately, and there's different things that I'd like to do career wise that are both creative and utilize experience that I've already got. Oh, the thing that is next for me creatively that I'm most excited about, um, we don't have to get too far into this. I don't have a hard out at our time limit, but I know we're at the time limit that we originally set. I've been doing ketamine therapy, um, and that
You've
is
been doing
a
what?
whole ketamine therapy.
Ketamine.
It's
Oh,
it's
okay.
all legal. It's my insurance is actually covering it, but um, it's a without getting too far into it, it's a very introspective experience, and I have a journal with me whenever it happens. And the thing I keep coming back to is I have not been writing for a long time in a way that I shared with people. I still journal pretty much every day, but I haven't been actually writing anything to share. And I am really excited to start doing that again. That's that I think, as silly as it sounds, like I'm really excited to like launch a blog, and I'm gonna be doing it over the next couple of weeks. I'm working on some posts right now, but that's not something where I'm saying to myself, oh yeah, this is gonna be your new career. It's something where I'm saying to myself, you are happier when you do this, so you need to do it again.
Your energy shifts as you talk about it. I mean, you can I can feel it. Can feel it. That's beautiful. I love that. And this will be you putting it out there instead of just writing it and sitting on it. This will be you putting it out there. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, I feel like all the journaling starts to kind of be like if you were carb loading for a marathon, but you never ran the marathon, right? Like so so mentally, emotionally, creatively, I'm just kind of making myself fatter right now. And it's time to actually put it to good use.
I love it. Spot on. Dwight, do you want to ask the big question of the day or shall I?
Oh, I'll try not to butcher it, but what is the one thing that you could use to really propel you forward? If you had your one big ask, if you were able to have that one wish granted that would propel you forward with where you want to be creatively, what is that thing?
Oof. Um, that's tough because I feel like I'm already finding it. I'm already getting that wish granted, but at the end of the day, it's just community. I am I am so much more driven, fulfilled, accountable to myself and to others if I'm doing it in parallel with other people. It's the reason that I was able to, you know, starve through being a mixologist for a few years because you're around people who care just as much as you do about creating a great product and giving people something good. So the thing that propels me forward the most, I don't know, maybe my wish is just a really, really fantastic writers group, you know, like community.
That's
I
a
love
beautiful
that.
thing.
Oh my God. Man after my own heart. Yes. Beautiful. Well, this has been amazing. I know that you were just a little bit anxious about being on your first podcast, but you've just shown up and just been really real, and you felt it, I've just watched you be really comfortable through the whole process. So I just want to reflect that back to you. You look very, very, very at ease.
Well, thank you. Thank you both because I was not a little bit nervous. I was extremely nervous leading up to this. And just talking with the two of you, um, it doesn't it doesn't feel like anything to be nervous about. It feels like we're having a conversation at Creative Mornings, and it's just I appreciate you guys being so easy to get into this deep stuff with.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
David. That
you.
means a lot.
Yeah.
This has been truly amazing.
Thank you. This was so much fun for me.